Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Nerds Drink Whiskey. And I kind of wish we would have known this was coming, because this would have made a great 100th episode. So we're here at Capital Scotch and Whiskey, and hopefully it's okay to mention them in this, because the person we're about to talk to makes illegal alcohol. So we're going to, I don't know if you're comfortable with using your name?
I don't know. I don't care.
Oh, Reg? Okay, so Reg, what is it that we already tasted his output? What is it that we tasted?
It's straight up moonshine, basically what it is. I have a small 8-gallon still, home still, and that's what that was. It was a couple of my runs of shine, basically.
Now let's wait to talk about the second one. But the first one you said was 111 proof, 110 proof, and what was the mash bill?
I think it was about 30-40% corn, probably roughly 20% barley, good little bit, 10 cups or so of sugar at least for each one of. But it's not just one run of that particular one that you drank was it was 4 different mash and distill runs to get that particular drink that you had. So the way I basically run it is I'll cook a mash and I'll distill it, and I'll do that 3 times. And each one of those may have a different grain bill. And then when I get through with those, I'll combine them all together in my still, and I'll run those again. And so that particular one, I'll usually pull off the nasty stuff, like the heads in the front, 4 shots, and I'll do it the correct way and everything. And that's my finished product, though, is a combination of, it's actually 4 different runs of the still to get to that one that we did.
Okay. Now, do you have any questions yet?
No, just tell us how you get started in doing your own distilling and shining.
Well, the truth is, my granddad was a moonshiner back in the day, back in the 30s, 40s, right up until about 1965. He was actually still making shine, and they were from.
He wouldn't be related to a man named Popcorn, would he?
I don't think so. No, they were in Mississippi. So I think that guy you're talking about is Kentucky, Tennessee, somewhere. Yeah. Anyway, that's part of it. But I came actually. The still that I'm running right now, I have not been running but for about a year and a half maybe or something like that. And actually what got me started again was my cousin here in Washington has actually been running. He's got a still that he's running the same way that I am. And I decided to go ahead and do the same thing. In fact, I actually paid for his still. I bought him a still so when he wanted one. And so I'm kind of doing it, but I'm doing it more in a boutique, trying to make it actually something besides just rock good moonshine type of thing. So
now, what is it? You are illegal. What is the barrier? What keeps you from wanting to, or do you have plans to eventually go legal?
Well, my still's so small that I'm not putting out enough product, and I don't really feel like I'm good enough at distilling now to actually start something. But I can see that may be something I might grow into. But I'm retired. I don't really want to do any work, to be honest with you. I just want to do kind of what I want to do. So starting any kind of business would be a little bit, kind of taken away from me. So no, probably I won't start anything.
All right. Anything to ask him?
No, just start. So that first one you take the 3 separate still runs, turn them into the 4th, and that's your final product. And that first one you aged a little bit with some wood. Then what was your kind of when you create a set, do you have like a theme in mind or an idea when you go into it? Actually, what I've kind of been thinking about, I'm really not doing it for any particular, I'm not trying to sell it.
I'm not trying to, I'll give it away to somebody who wants it, and I'll let them try it. Like, today I'll let you guys try out some. But I'm kind of just doing it because it's something that I like doing, and I want to get really, really good at it. And the truth of the matter is, I kind of thought about, I would just keep making this stuff and not do anything with it and just put it on the shelf. And I can only imagine that some guy that can appreciate whiskey or moonshine, 20 years from now, find my little building there with, multiple bottles of shine in there. My daughter may get some money to retire on or something. And it's all boutiques, and I've actually gotten, my notes about how I made all of it, and everything's there. So I'm just kind of doing it for doing it. I'm not really. So
so with the one that you had us try, so when you go into, you say it takes about a month to make one of your batches. And I know you're talking about how you like to change it up every time. Do you kind of have like a theme behind each month, or is it like, oh hey, it's October, I want something kind of fall, a summery with like, is there any like, now that you've been doing it for a while, here's an end goal I'm looking for, or is it just play and see what happens?
There's no real plan. I've just kind of been doing it just to see what happens. I want to try a lot of different stuff. Like so far, I've used corn. I've worked with barley, and I'm thinking about, as when I get back home to Texas, I'm going to probably, the next run, I'm probably going to get some rye and try a little rye. So my thing is just experimenting and kind of playing around with it. I just want to see something that's really good. Of course, you guys tried that one, and y'all kind of liked that one. And I just wanted to know, basically, am I doing any good with this? Because I'm not really a whiskey guy, but I like the distilling process. So I can't tell you, hey, I've got a good taste, for different types of hard liquor, because I just don't,
Now, we also, of course, need to talk about the second one we tried, which was, I hope you're all sitting down, it was 140 proof. So why don't we talk about your 140 proof? This one did not have the coloring that the first one had, and that most whiskeys had. I think most people would consider it a white dog.
It was just moonshine. It wasn't even I wouldn't even necessarily call it whiskey. It's more correct to call it moonshine.
Yeah. So I guess it wouldn't even be a white dog. It would be, okay. So why don't we talk about that?
Okay. What I did with that particular one, the first one that you tried, the one that was actually had some color to it, it was just an experiment. I bought some chips and put in the moonshine to try to see what it would do, and it did change the taste of it, and it did it pretty quickly. The second one, I just didn't put that stuff in there, and technically, of course, moonshine's not supposed to be. It's not technically supposed to be aged, and it's not technically supposed to be, you put it in a barrel and it turns brown. Moonshine's supposed to be clear, but I'm experimenting with different stuff, and there's a fine line, in my opinion, between moonshine and whiskey, probably, and anybody would probably say that too. So my deal is just kind of playing around with it. I figure at some point in time I'm going to try to make a little vodka, maybe a little rum, different kind of things. So my whole deal is mostly just to become a good distiller, being able to do that. That's really what I'm more interested in. So I don't really have a scheme. I don't have a plan. I'm just playing around. So
cool. All right. I don't know. I'm trying to think of any questions. Any other questions that we could ask him?
So you were saying that this is a fairly annual trip for you. You go down. You're in Texas most of the year. You come up here about once or twice a year. I would say if it's maybe go talk to some of the folks at Seesaw, get some ideas, and maybe get some inspiration, and then when you come back in a year, you can bring something, and here's I took all your information. Here's what's up, came of it. I'd be really looking forward to your product in a year and see what you've done.
Yeah, makes perfect sense, and I appreciate you guys giving me all that information about that, because you're essentially the first people that have tried out some of my product. I mean, I'll try to give it to, but the reality of it is finding somebody that has a real appreciation for that sort of stuff is rare. Where I'm from, it's kind of rare anyway. Everybody nowadays, it seemed like our culture's changing. Back when Granddad was making shine, he didn't have any trouble selling it. But nowadays, I know the place where I live, and I'll make the shine and I'll share it with other people, and I rarely find somebody that's kind of into it. There's really not very many people into that sort of thing anymore. And so it may be, which may be why it's kind of a moot point whether it's illegal or not, because nobody's looking at you because they don't care. Right, because nobody wants it anyway. It's not like you're hurting the liquor store by, somebody's buying mine instead of theirs.
Well, it's kind of like gambling is illegal, but I can guarantee you there's probably maybe 1,000 poker games going on right now in the Puget Sound area, and the cops don't really care at all. At a certain level, it becomes, I guess it's illegal, and that's kind of where you're at. Is yes, you're illegal, but nobody's really going to put any resources towards hunting you down because it is such a small amount. You're not selling it, truckloads of it at a time.
Right. Well, yeah, and so far I'm not selling anything. I'm just giving some away. But, the kicker is that you can I bought my still online. You can buy a still online, and when it gets to your house, it says right in the paperwork, this is for distilling water. That's what they tell you it's for. And that's their the technical aspect of it. But the fact of the matter is, it's anything that runs a still. So you can buy a still online, but it technically is illegal to have. That's the deal.
So that reminds during Prohibition, back whenever we started making Shine, you could still sell whiskey and alcohol and liquor as long as for medicinal purposes only. So same thing. It's like, or you go to a head shop. Now we're in Washington, and you can sell a bong, and you can advertise that it's for your marijuana, but it was for tobacco use only. It was like, no one smokes tobacco out of these things. Yeah. So but I'm amused that it's for water, because I've seen distills. The other use that I know is for essential oils. So people use them make soap. You're gonna distill essential oils to like lavender or orange or whatever, and that's also a perfectly legal, legitimate use for a still. The fact that they say for water use only is kind of amusing, because there are other things that are more likely for you to use than water. But
exactly, yeah, that's true essentially. But the reality, I think, for me thinking about it, if you were going to say I'm going to get something out of it besides just the enjoyment of actually making moonshine with it, if everything went down, we reached some point where everything kind of crashed. Probably the guy with the stills may be the only guy in town eating. You never know. Because when the liquor store empties and, bad times, one thing that always sells is alcohol.
Well, and especially in bad times, the guy selling alcohol is going to make some money.
Yeah, exactly. So, there may be that. That may be what I'm looking for. But, it's just a really neat thing. It's kind of a cool thing. And meeting you guys and y'all tasting it and all that, I know there are people that into kind of all that sort of stuff. And I've kind of thought about myself, you're kind of weird. You're making whiskey, but you don't really drink it, but maybe I can be more objective about it when I make it that way.
We at Nerds Drink Whiskey are all about weird. We embrace the weird. We're nerds. We know weird. So, all right. Is there any final questions or any final comments you have before we close out this episode?
No, I just thanks for letting us try it, and I'm looking forward to your next batch.
Cool. Any final comments?
Oh, well, thanks for tasting it, and next year if I get back up here, maybe we'll get together, see you guys again. We'll have some new product or something like that, something different.
So. I'm actually curious, did your grandfather leave notes behind for you to follow to learn how to do it?
The person behind the camera is asking, my wife actually is asking if there was any notes left behind from Grandpa.
The truth of the matter is, I know my grandpa halfway well, but I don't actually know if he even could read and write, to be honest with you. I never saw him do it. So, no, there are no notes. There are no notes for any of that sort of stuff. He died in 1974, and it's just, but no, there's nothing. They just did it back then. Everybody knew how to still, back in the day, and that's the kicker about it, And they had products there, the things that they were pretty much, if you think about it, those guys back then, they were living out in the country, Mississippi. So what did they have? They had corn and they had sugar, and all those things were cheap. And so that's basically what they were doing. They were using cheap products to make something, that was produced there locally, that they could use there. So it's interesting, but no notes.
You did have a question?
Oh, just that. Was any of his legacy an old still, or did do you ever his old car with with the?
Was there anything left behind?
Anything left from his old Shine operation?
The only story I know is in about 1963 or 64. Maybe it was earlier than that. And I remember my mom telling the story about him coming in with mason jars because he was fixing to do something, and I was following right behind him, and I was about 4 or 5 years old because he had with mason jar under my arm. She tells about. So he was still doing it back then. I can't imagine that really that was probably was a part-time-ish type of thing compared to what it was back in the 40s or 50s, But I honestly think pretty much their product, as far as us talking about it and you being whiskey guys and, lots of different stuff, I'm sure that everything that he made was straight up, and probably everybody around there made almost the same product. And it probably was so much corn and so much sugar. That's pretty much that was it. And, spring water if you could find it. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. And when you're not drinking whiskey and you got to go to work, we don't recommend drinking moonshine or whiskey when you go to work. However, we do recommend a product called Freshly. It's not frozen; it is fresh. But if you need to take a meal to work, this is the most transportable pre-prepared meal you can get. The best tasting I've ever had. Just go to nerdsdrinkwhiskey.com/freshly or go to the nerdsdrinkwhiskey.com website, click on the Freshly link, and try out Freshly. It helps out this show, and I'm telling you, it is the best meal that you can have transportable to work. Bring a knife and fork because you will need to cut the meat. It's real meat. It's real food. So nerdsdrinkwhiskey.com/freshly, and we'll see you next week for another episode of Nerds Drink Whiskey.